The blizzard screamed across the Montana plains like a living thing, clawing at Grace Holloway's threadbare cloak as she stumbled through snow that reached her knees. Her fingers, blue beneath torn gloves, clutched the leather satchel containing everything she owned: 3 dresses, a tintype of her mother, and the silver locket she'd promised herself she'd never sell. That promise died somewhere between the last town and this endless white hell. Her boots, more whole than leather, had lost all feeling an hour ago. The marriage certificate, signed but never consummated, thank God, had blown from her bag miles back. Let the wind take it. Let it take her too, if it meant never returning to Gerald Pritchard's ranch, to his whiskey breath and wandering hands, to the preacher who'd tied her to a monster for the price of her father's gambling debts. If you're enjoying this story, I'd be so grateful if you could take just a moment to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and give this video a like. Your support truly matters and motivates us to bring you more quality content like this. Thank you for being here. The dark shape emerged from the white curtain like a fever dream. A cabin, smoke rising from its chimney in defiance of the storm. Grace's legs gave out 20 yards from the door. She crawled, her palms burning against ice and rock until her bloodied knuckles found wood. She knocked once, twice, then the world tilted sideways. Warmth. That registered first. Then the crackling of fire, the smell of coffee and something cooking. Venison, maybe. Grace's eyes fluttered open to find herself on a bearskin rug, wrapped in a quilt that smelled of cedar and sage. A shadow moved near the fireplace, and she jerked upright, her heart hammering. Easy now. The voice came low and steady, like distant thunder. You're safe. He stepped into the light, and Grace's breath caught. The man stood well over 6 feet, broad-shouldered beneath a wool shirt rolled to his elbows. Dark hair fell past his collar, and eyes the color of a storm-heavy sky studied her with an intensity that made her want to both run and stay rooted to the spot. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, giving him a dangerous look that his next words contradicted entirely. Found you face down in the snow. Another 10 minutes and he didn't finish. Just turned back to the pot hanging over the fire. You need food, then we'll talk. Grace's hand moved instinctively to the locket at her throat, her mother's, the only thing of value she had left. She fumbled with the clasp, her fingers still clumsy with cold. I can pay. For the food, the shelter, it's sterling silver, worth at least, keep it. He ladled stew into a wooden bowl and crossed to her in 2 strides, kneeling to press it into her hands. His fingers were calloused, warm against her frozen skin. Silver isn't what we need here. You are. The words hung between them, strange and weighted with meaning Grace couldn't quite grasp. She stared at him, searching for the catch, the price that always came with kindness. His eyes held steady, patient. Name's Nathaniel Cord. This is my cabin. He settled back on his heels, maintaining a respectful distance. Storm like this, you'll be here 3 days minimum, maybe a week. So let's get one thing straight. You're not property, you're a person. You owe me nothing but honesty. Can you give me that? Grace's throat tightened. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump forming there. When was the last time someone had asked permission for anything from her? When had anyone cared about her honesty? I'm Grace, her voice cracked. Grace Holloway. I'm running from a marriage. He hurt you? The question came sharp as a blade. Grace flinched, and that told him everything. Nathaniel's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the stubble covering it. But his voice remained gentle. Then you ran in the right direction. Eat. We'll figure the rest out when you're stronger. The stew tasted like salvation, rich and hot, with chunks of tender meat and root vegetables that melted on her tongue. Grace ate mechanically at first, then ravenously, scraping the bowl clean. Nathaniel refilled it without a word, and she devoured that too, shame mixing with hunger. Ladies weren't supposed to eat like starved animals. But then, ladies weren't supposed to flee into blizzards either. There's a bed in the loft, Nathaniel said when she finally set the bowl aside. It's yours for as long as you need it. I'll sleep down here. I can't take your bed. You can and you will. He stood, moving to the window where snow piled against the glass. This storm's a bad one. Worst I've seen in 5 years out here. You're lucky you found this place. Why are you being kind to me? The question escaped before Grace could stop it. You don't know me. I could be anyone, a thief, a liar. Could be. Nathaniel turned, and something in his expression made Grace's chest ache. Loss, maybe. Old grief. But I see a woman worth saving. That's enough. The next morning, or what Grace assumed was morning in the perpetual twilight of the storm, she woke to find clean clothes folded at the foot of the loft ladder. Men's clothes, wool trousers, a flannel shirt, thick socks. They swallowed her frame, but they were warm and whole, and she nearly wept pulling them on. Nathaniel was stoking the fire when she climbed down, his back to her. Grace cleared her throat. Thank you for the clothes. Belonged to my brother. He didn't turn around. He was smaller than me. They'll fit you better than anything I've got. Was? Died 2 winters ago. Pneumonia. Nathaniel straightened, his face carefully neutral. It's just me now. I'm sorry. Don't be. He lived good. Died quick. Can't ask for much more than that. He gestured to the table, where bread and butter waited alongside more coffee. You know how to cook? Grace nodded. My mother taught me before she passed. Good, because I'm terrible at it. The ghost of a smile touched his mouth. You handle meals, I'll handle everything else. Fair trade while you're here. It was the beginning of a routine that shaped the days ahead. Grace cooked. Simple fare at first, then more elaborate meals as Nathaniel's well-stocked pantry revealed itself. He'd prepared for the winter like a man who knew isolation, with barrels of flour and cornmeal, dried beans, salted meat, and even luxuries like sugar and coffee beans. In return, he taught her things no lady was supposed to know. How to split kindling without losing a finger. How to read the sky for weather changes. How to load and fire the rifle that hung above the door. Every person out here needs to know how to protect themselves, he said, his hands covering hers as he showed her the proper stance. Especially women traveling alone. His touch was brief, professional, but Grace felt it long after he stepped away. The warmth of his palms, the steadiness of his presence at her back. The storm raged for 6 days. 6 days of howling wind and snow that buried the cabin's windows halfway up. 6 days of close quarters and careful politeness. 6 days of Grace learning the rhythms of Nathaniel Cord. How he woke before dawn to feed the fire. How he carved small wooden figures by lamplight in the evenings. How he moved through space with the quiet confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. And 6 days of him learning her. How she hummed while cooking. Old hymns her mother had taught her. How she flinched at sudden movements, but was learning not to. How she sat by the window in the afternoons, watching the snow with an expression that broke his heart a little. On the 7th day, The storm broke. Grace woke to sunlight streaming through the windows, so bright after days of gray that she had to shield her eyes. The silence felt deafening without the wind's constant roar. She climbed down from the loft to find Nathaniel already dressed in his heavy coat, pulling on gloves. "I need to check on the livestock," he said. "Barn's about 50 yards east. I'll be gone an hour, maybe 2. Don't open the door for anyone but me." "You have animals?" Grace moved to the window, peering out at the vast expanse of white. "I haven't heard anything. Barn's built good. Keeps the sound in and the cold out." He picked up the rifle, checked it with practiced efficiency, and set it within her reach. "You remember how to use this?" Grace nodded, her mouth dry. The reality of her situation crystallized with the storm's end. Soon, she'd have to leave this warm sanctuary. Soon, she'd have to face the world again, and Gerald Pritchard, who wouldn't take kindly to his bride running off. "Nathaniel?" Her voice stopped him at the door. "When the sun comes up tomorrow, you'll want me to leave, won't you? I mean, the storm's over now, and you've been more than kind, but I can't expect—" He turned, and the look in his eyes pinned her in place. "Is that what you think? That I've been counting the days until I could send you back out there? I wouldn't blame you. I'm nothing but trouble. You're a woman who had the courage to run from a bad situation in the middle of a blizzard." Nathaniel crossed back to her in 3 long strides. "You're a woman who's been working herself raw, trying to earn her keep, when I already told you that wasn't necessary. You're a woman who flinches when I move too fast, but is learning to trust again anyway." He stopped just short of touching her, his hands flexing at his sides. "So no, Grace Holloway. When the sun comes up tomorrow, I won't want you to leave. I'll want you to stay. For as long as you need. For as long as you want." The words hung between them, charged with possibility and danger, and something Grace was afraid to name. She opened her mouth, closed it, then finally managed. "Why?" "Because for the first time in 2 years, this cabin doesn't feel like a tomb." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Because you hum while you cook, and you're not afraid to tell me when my coffee's too strong. Because you're here, and that's enough." He left before Grace could respond, the door closing softly behind him. She stood frozen, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. What was she supposed to do with that? With the warmth in his voice, the careful respect in his distance. The implication that he wanted her to stay, not out of pity, but because he liked having her here? Grace pressed her hands to her burning cheeks. Ladies weren't supposed to feel this way about men they'd known for a week. But then, ladies weren't supposed to do a lot of things Grace had done lately. The hour stretched into 3 before Grace heard footsteps crunching through snow. She grabbed the rifle, her heart leaping into her throat, then relaxed when Nathaniel's voice called out, "It's me, coming in." He stamped snow from his boots in the doorway, and Grace's relief at seeing him curdled into alarm. His face was gray beneath its tan, his left hand pressed against his side. Blood seeped between his fingers, staining his coat black. Oh God, Grace dropped the rifle and rushed forward. What happened? Damn fool mistake. Nathaniel grimaced, letting her guide him to a chair. One of the horses spooked when I opened the barn, kicked me into a nail sticking out of the wall. Just a scratch. Let me see. Grace's hands shook as she helped him out of his coat. The shirt beneath was soaked with blood, and when she peeled it away, she saw the gash running along his ribs, 4 inches long and deep enough to make her stomach turn. This is not a scratch. This needs stitching. I'll be fine. You'll be dead if infection sets in. Grace surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. She'd nursed her mother through her final illness. She knew how quickly wounds could turn. "Do you have a needle and thread? Whiskey?" Nathaniel stared at her for a long moment, then nodded toward a trunk in the corner. "Medical supplies are in there. Bottle of whiskey, too." Grace worked with hands steadier than she felt, threading the needle while water heated over the fire. She cleaned the wound as gently as she could, though Nathaniel still hissed through his teeth when the whiskey hit torn flesh. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." "Not your fault." His voice was tight with pain. "Just get it done." The first stitch made him go rigid, his good hand gripping the chair arm hard enough to make the wood creak. The second drew a sound low in his throat that Grace felt in her bones. By the third, she was shaking so badly she had to stop. "I can't. I'm hurting you." "You're saving me." Nathaniel's free hand found hers, squeezed gently. "Go slow. Take your time. I trust you." Grace blinked back tears and forced herself to continue. Stitch by careful stitch, she closed the wound, murmuring apologies with each pull of the thread. Nathaniel never complained, just held her hand and breathed through it, his thumb tracing small circles against her knuckles. When she tied off the final stitch and bandaged his side with strips of clean cloth, exhaustion hit her like a physical force. Grace swayed, and Nathaniel caught her with his good arm, pulling her down to rest her head against his shoulder. "Thank you," he murmured into her hair. "That took courage. You took me in during a storm." Grace's words came muffled against his shirt. "You gave me shelter and food and asked for nothing. This is the least I could do." "It's not a debt, Grace. You don't owe me." "I know." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "That's why I wanted to help, because you've shown me what kindness looks like without a price attached. Because when you look at me, you don't see property or a burden. You see a person. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Nathaniel's hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her cheek. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, calloused and gentle. "You deserve to be seen, to be valued. Any man who taught you otherwise was a fool." The kiss happened so gradually that later, Grace wouldn't be able to say who moved first. One moment, they were staring at each other, breathing hard, the space between them charged with possibility. The next, his lips were on hers, soft, questioning, giving her every opportunity to say no. Grace said yes with her hands fisting in his shirt. Yes with the small sound that escaped her throat. Yes with the way she leaned into him despite his injuries. Nathaniel kissed her like she was precious, like she might break, and Grace had never felt stronger in her life. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers. "I shouldn't have done that. You've been through hell. You're vulnerable. I'm not some fragile thing to be protected from her own choices." Grace's voice came stronger than she felt. "I wanted that. I wanted you." "Grace, you'll leave when the sun comes up," she whispered, the old fear creeping back. "Now that the storm's over, now that you're hurt and No." The word came fierce, absolute. Nathaniel's hands framed her face, making sure she couldn't look away. "I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you. Not unless you want to. Do you understand me? You're not a guest here anymore. You're—" He stopped, seemed to struggle with the words, then tried again. "You're home, if you want to be." Grace's answering kiss tasted of salt and relief and promises neither of them was ready to speak out loud. For now, this was enough. His arms around her, his heartbeat steady beneath her palm. and the knowledge that she'd finally found a place where she belonged. The days that followed fell into a new rhythm, shaped by Nathaniel's healing and the tentative exploration of whatever was growing between them. Grace changed his bandages twice daily, her touch growing more confident as the wound began to close. Nathaniel taught her to ride the gentlest of his 3 horses, a mare named Willow with a patient temperament and soft brown eyes. "You're a natural," he said, watching Grace guide Willow around the corral. The snow had melted enough to make the paths passable, and the Montana sky stretched blue and endless overhead. "Better than Daniel was when I first taught him." "Your brother?" Grace brought Willow to a stop beside where Nathaniel leaned against the fence, his healing side still favoring him. "Yeah." Something flickered across his face. Grief, but gentler now, worn smooth by time. "He was younger than me by 5 years. Followed me out here after the war. I wanted to give him a fresh start, away from everything." Grace dismounted, reading the story in what he didn't say. "You fought?" "For the Union. 3 years." Nathaniel's hand moved unconsciously to the scar through his eyebrow. "Got this at Gettysburg. Got a lot more than a scar from that place, if I'm honest." Grace reached up, traced the old wound with tentative fingers. "Does it still hurt?" "Not anymore." He caught her hand, pressed his lips to her palm. "Not when you're here." They stood like that for a long moment, the horses nickering softly nearby, the wind carrying the scent of prairie grass and possibility. Then Grace asked the question that had been building in her chest for days. What happens when spring comes? When the pass is clear and people can travel again? Nathaniel's expression shuddered. "What do you want to happen?" "I asked you first." "Grace, Gerald will come looking for me." The name tasted like poison on her tongue. "He paid good money for a wife. Men like him don't let go of their property easily." "Then he'll learn you're not property." Nathaniel straightened, and despite the healing wound in his side, he looked every inch the soldier he'd once been. "He'll learn that you're under my protection, and if he doesn't like it, he can take it up with me." "You'd fight for me? You barely know me." "I know enough." His hands settled on her waist, warm through the borrowed shirt she wore. "I know you're brave and kind. I know you hum while you cook, and you apologize to the chickens when you take their eggs. I know you flinch when doors slam, but you're learning not to. I know you deserve better than to live your life afraid." He paused, his voice dropping lower. "And I know that when I think about spring coming and you leaving, it feels like losing Daniel all over again. So no, Grace, I won't let him take you. Not without going through me first." Grace's vision blurred with tears. "Why? Why do you care so much?" "Because Nathaniel stopped, swallowed hard, then tried again. "Because this cabin felt like a grave until you walked into it. Because I'd forgotten what it was like to wake up and want to be awake, to cook breakfast for someone besides myself, to have a reason to smile. Because you make me want to be better than the man I was, the one who was just existing, just surviving. You make me want to live again." The confession hung between them, raw and vulnerable. Grace saw the fear in his eyes, the terror of opening himself up after so much loss, and recognized it because she felt it too. This thing between them was dangerous. It could hurt them both. But the alternative was going back to being alone, and Grace had learned that some risks were worth taking. "I don't want to leave," she whispered. "When spring comes, when the pass is clear, I don't want to leave." Nathaniel's exhale sounded like relief and wonder mixed together. Then stay. Stay with me. Not as a guest or someone working off a debt. Stay as what? As mine. The word came fierce, possessive in a way that should have frightened her, but instead said heat pooling in her stomach. As my woman, my partner, as someone I'm building a life with, if you'll have me. Grace answered by pulling his head down to hers, kissing him with all the pent-up emotion of the past weeks. Nathaniel groaned against her mouth, his hands sliding up her back, pulling her closer despite his healing ribs. The kiss deepened, turned desperate, until they were both breathing hard and Grace's legs felt unsteady. Grace. Her name came out rough, wrecked. If you don't stop, I won't be able to. Then don't stop. She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes, her own burning with determination. I'm not fragile, Nathaniel. I'm not going to break. I want this. I want you. Your side is healing fine. He proved it by lifting her off her feet, swallowing her surprised laugh with another kiss. And I'll die before I hurt you. Do you believe that? Grace wrapped her arms around his neck, pressed her forehead to his. I believe that together we can face whatever comes. That's enough. He carried her inside the cabin, kicking the door closed behind them. What happened next was tender and fierce by turns, punctuated by whispered confessions and careful touches. Nathaniel worshipped her with hands that shook, mapping every scar and soft place like he was memorizing scripture. Grace learned the geography of his body in return. The old bullet wound in his shoulder, the newer scar on his ribs, the places that made him gasp when she touched them. Go slow, she whispered when he hesitated at the last barrier. It hurts. I'll die before I hurt you, he promised again, and proved it with patience that made her want to weep. He gentled her through it, whispering praise and love words against her skin, until the pain gave way to pleasure that made her forget her own name. After, they lay tangled together in his bed, their bed now, Grace supposed, watching firelight dance across the ceiling. Nathaniel's hand traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder, his other arm pillowing her head. I meant what I said, he murmured into the comfortable silence. About you staying, about building a life together. I know. Grace pressed a kiss to his collarbone. And I meant what I said. I'm not leaving. Not now, not ever. Even when Gerald comes looking? Especially then. She propped herself up on one elbow, meeting his eyes. Because I finally found somewhere I belong. Someone who sees me as more than property or a burden. And I'll fight to keep that, to keep you. Nathaniel pulled her back down, tucked her against his side. Then we'll fight together. That's what partners do. Spring arrived slowly, the snow melting in patches to reveal the brown grass beneath. Nathaniel's wound healed to a pink scar that Grace traced with her fingers on quiet mornings. She learned to ride well enough to help him with the horses, to shoot well enough to bring down a rabbit for dinner. He learned the sound of her laughter, the way she sang to herself when she thought he wasn't listening, the exact placement of the freckles across her nose. They were mending the corral fence on a bright April morning when the riders appeared on the horizon. Grace spotted them first, her hands stilling on the hammer. Nathaniel. He followed her gaze and went still. 3 men on horseback, moving fast. Even from a distance, Grace recognized the lead rider's bulky frame and the cruel set of his shoulders. Gerald Pritchard had come to collect his property. Get in the house, Nathaniel said quietly. Take the rifle. Don't come out unless I call for you. I won't hide. Grace. He turned to face her, his expression harder than she'd ever seen it. I need you safe. That's not negotiable. Please. Grace wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. This was about more than Gerald. This was about every person Nathaniel had lost, every failure that still haunted him. This was about protecting what was his. And she was his, just as surely as he was hers. Together, she said fiercely, gripping his hand. We face this together. I'll be in the house, but I won't be helpless. I won't let him hurt you. Nathaniel kissed her hard and fast. I'll die before I let him take you. Do you believe that? I believe you. Grace squeezed his hand once more, then ran for the cabin. She grabbed the rifle from above the door, checked that it was loaded the way he'd taught her, and positioned herself at the window where she had a clear view of the yard. Gerald reined in his horse 20 feet from where Nathaniel stood, his companions flanking him on either side. He'd gotten heavier since Grace had fled, his face ruddier with drink and temper. When he smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. Cord, Gerald's voice carried across the yard. Heard you might be harboring my wife. Figure you found her wandering around after that storm. Maybe didn't know she belonged to someone else. I'm here to collect her. No hard feelings. She's not here, Nathaniel said flatly. That's so? Gerald's smile widened. Because a man in town saw a woman matching her description, riding out this way. Wearing men's clothes, he said. Living here without the benefit of marriage. Now I'm a reasonable man, Cord. I understand a woman alone in a storm, a man alone in a cabin. Things happen. But Grace is mine. Paid good money for her, and I'm taking her back. She's not yours. Nathaniel's voice stayed level, but Grace could see the tension in his shoulders. The way his hand hovered near the gun at his hip. She's not anyone's, and she's not going anywhere. Gerald's pretense of civility cracked. You listen here, you half-breed. I'd be real careful what you say next. Nathaniel cut him off, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Real careful. One of Gerald's companions leaned forward, spoke low enough that Grace couldn't hear the words. Gerald's expression darkened further. He shifted in his saddle, and Grace saw the rifle strapped to it, saw the way his hand moved toward it. She was through the door before conscious thought caught up, the rifle leveled at Gerald's chest. You touch that gun, and I'll put a bullet in you where you sit. 3 sets of eyes swiveled to her. Gerald's face went from red to purple. Grace, get over here, now. No. She moved to stand beside Nathaniel, her aim never wavering. I'm not your wife. I never was. That marriage was forced, and I'm not going back. You don't have a choice. She has every choice. Nathaniel's hand found the small of her back, steady and sure. And she's made it. You need to leave. Now. Gerald's laugh was ugly. Or what? You'll fight me? You and your whore against 3 armed men? The world slowed down. Gerald's hand moved toward his rifle. Nathaniel's gun cleared its holster in a blur of motion. Grace's finger tightened on the trigger, her aim true, her heart steady. The shot that rang out came from Nathaniel's gun. Gerald's rifle went spinning from his saddle, landing in the dirt 10 feet away. Gerald's horse reared, and he fought to keep his seat, his face a mask of shock and rage. Next one goes in your shoulder, Nathaniel said calmly. The one after that, your knee. You want to keep playing this game, or do you want to ride away while you still can? Gerald's companions had gone pale, their hands carefully away from their weapons. Grace kept her rifle trained on them, her stance solid, her message clear. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't afraid. You'll regret this, Gerald spat, wheeling his horse around. Both of you. I'll be back with the law. Then bring the law. Nathaniel holstered his gun. Bring a judge. Bring whoever you want, because there's no law that says a woman has to stay with a man who beats her. No law that makes her property. And I've got a whole town of people who'll testify that Grace came here fleeing violence, that I took her in as charity, and that we've done nothing wrong." He paused. "Let that sink in. But if you want to try your luck in court, be my guest. I'd love to let a judge hear about how you got that marriage certificate, about the gambling debts, and the threats, and the 12-year-old witness who can testify that Grace never consented to anything." Gerald's face worked through several emotions before settling on impotent rage. This isn't over. Yeah, it is. Nathaniel's arm slid around Grace's waist, solid and possessive. "Right away. Gerald, don't come back." They watched the three men disappear over the rise, dust marking their passage. Only when they were completely out of sight did Grace lower her rifle, her hands starting to shake with delayed reaction. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know you told me to stay inside, but I couldn't. I couldn't let him." "Don't apologize." Nathaniel turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You were magnificent. Terrifying and magnificent. I'm pretty sure I fell even more in love with you watching you face him down." Grace's breath caught. "You love me?" "Yeah." He said it like it was the simplest truth in the world. "Have for a while now. Just wasn't sure how to tell you. Figured maybe scaring off your violent ex-husband together was as good a time as any." She laughed, the sound a little hysterical, and buried her face against his chest. "You're insane." "Probably." His arms tightened around her. "But I'm also yours, if you'll have me." Grace pulled back, met his eyes. "Marry me." Nathaniel blinked. "What?" "Marry me," she repeated, stronger now. "I don't want to be your woman or your partner or whatever careful term we've been dancing around. I want to be your wife. Really your wife, with vows that matter and a choice that's mine. Marry me," Nathaniel called. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then his face broke into a smile so wide, it transformed him from dangerous to beautiful. "Yes, God, yes, 1,000 times yes." He kissed her there, in the yard, in full view of anyone who might be watching, claiming her and being claimed in return. When they finally broke apart, both grinning like fools, Grace asked, "So, how do we do this? Is there a preacher in town?" "There is. We can ride in tomorrow. Be married by nightfall if you want." "I want." Grace laced her fingers through his. "I want everything, Nathaniel. A life with you. A home. Maybe, someday, children. I want to wake up beside you and know I chose this, that it's real." "It's real," he promised. "The realest thing I've ever had." They were married 3 days later in a small church in town, with the preacher's wife and the blacksmith as witnesses. Grace wore a simple blue dress that Nathaniel had bought for her, and he wore a clean shirt with his hair tied back. The ceremony was brief, the vows traditional, but when Nathaniel slipped a plain gold band on her finger and promised to love her until his dying day, Grace felt something settle in her chest, something that felt like peace. The town threw them a modest celebration at the saloon. Food and music and enough whiskey to make everyone generous with their toasts. Grace met neighbors she didn't know she had, received congratulations from weathered ranchers and their sun-browned wives. For the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged to a community rather than being owned by it. But the best moment came later, after they'd ridden home through the spring darkness, after Nathaniel had carried her over the threshold like she weighed nothing at all. They stood together on the porch, watching stars emerge in the vast Montana sky, his arms wrapped around her from behind. Happy? He murmured against her hair. Grace leaned back into his warmth, her hand covering his where it rested against her stomach. So happy I'm afraid I'll wake up and find it's all a dream. Not a dream. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Just life. Our life. Together. Together, Grace agreed, and turned in his arms to seal the promise with a kiss. The seasons turned. Summer brought heat that baked the prairie grass gold and filled the cabin with the scent of wildflowers Grace picked on her morning rides. Nathaniel taught her to swim in the creek that ran through their property, laughing when she splashed him and threatening revenge that always ended in kisses. They worked side by side, expanding the corral, mending fences, putting up vegetables for the winter ahead. Autumn arrived in a blaze of color, and with it came the first frost and the work of preparing for snow. Grace had stopped flinching at sudden movements by then, had learned to reach for Nathaniel in the night without fear. He'd stopped looking at her like she might disappear, had learned to accept her help without seeing it as a burden. They were partners in the truest sense, each carrying their share of the load, each supporting the other through hard days and celebrating the good ones together. Winter's return found them better prepared than before. The barn was stocked, the pantry full, the woodpile high enough to last through even the worst storms. And when the snow came again, burying the world in white, Grace felt no fear. She was home. She was safe. She was loved. He was on one of those snow-quiet nights, with the fire burning low and Nathaniel carving a small wooden horse for the children they'd someday have, that Grace finally put words to the transformation that had taken place in her heart. You know what you said that first day? She looked up from the socks she was darning. About how I'd leave when the sun came up? Nathaniel's hands stilled on the carving. I remember. I was so sure you'd want me gone, that the kindness couldn't last. Grace set aside her mending and moved to sit at his feet, her head resting against his knee. I spent weeks expecting you to change, to become like Gerald, like my father, to demand payment for the shelter you'd given me. Grace, but you didn't, she continued softly. You lit the fire that first night, and you kept it burning. Through the storm, through spring, through summer and fall and winter again. You've kept us warm and safe and whole. She looked up at him, her eyes shining in the firelight. You told me silver wasn't what we needed. You said I was what we needed. And you were right. But you're what I needed too. You're the home I'd been searching for my whole life without knowing it. Nathaniel set aside his carving and pulled her into his lap, mindful of his long-heeled ribs. You're the reason I kept the fire burning, the reason I wanted to wake up each morning. You made this place a home instead of just a house full of ghosts. Grace kissed him slowly, deeply, tasting love and promise and the comfortable certainty of forever. When they finally pulled apart, she whispered against his lips, "You'll leave when the sun comes up," I said. But you lit the fire and stayed till winter, and the winter after that. And you'll stay through every winter to come, won't you? Every winter, he promised. Every spring, summer, and fall. Every sunrise and sunset. Every breath I take until my last one. His hand found hers, their wedding bands clicking softly together. Together. Together, Grace agreed, and kissed him again, while the fire burned low and the snow fell soft outside, and the life they'd built together settled around them like a blessing. Years later, when their children asked how their parents met, Grace would tell them about the storm and the kindness and the fire that never went out. Nathaniel would add the parts about her courage, her strength, the way she'd faced down her demons and won. And together, they'd explain that love wasn't always gentle or easy, but when it was real, when it was true, it was worth fighting for, worth staying for, worth building a life around, one winter after another, until the end of all winters came, and even then, the fire they'd lit together would burn on in the hearts of those who came after. But that was years in the future. For now, there was just this moment. Two people who'd found each other in the midst of a storm, who'd chosen each other again and again, who'd built something real from nothing but hope and stubborn determination, and a love that refused to be broken. There was just this moment, and it was enough. It was everything. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Grace and Nathaniel's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.